Hello BookTube, and hello AuthorTube. I wanted to give you a quick update on Camp NaNoWriMo, which I am participating in this year. I try to do it every year. Camp NaNoWriMo is one of two spin-off events from the main NaNoWriMo in November, which is National Novel Writing Month, where there are fairly strict guidelines. It's all fun. It's all in fun. It's hundreds of thousands of people having fun. So you don't have to follow them. But nevertheless, I think if you're going to indulge in something, you should indulge by its own rules. So I do. And the rules in November are, well, first of all, 50,000 words. You're supposed to shoot for 50,000 words, 1,667 words a day, to finish the rough draft of a new work of fiction. Not nonfiction, not fan fiction, and not something old, not something that you're revising, but a new work of fiction, 50,000 words in November. But there are spin-off events because people just can't get enough of the community feeling of NaNoWriMo events. I understand what the folks behind NaNoWriMo are probably thinking about not watering down the brand, but I honestly think they could do one of these every month and people would love it. Instead, they do one in April and one in July, and they're called Camp NaNoWriMo. And they were originally patterned after summer camp in that they were regimented, but not nearly as much so. You can, in Camp NaNoWriMo, you can revise an earlier work. In Camp NaNoWriMo, you do not have to hit 50,000 words. You can set your own word count. In Camp NaNoWriMo, you can write whatever you want. It can be nonfiction, it can be fan fiction, or whatever. For my own simplicity's sake, just the way my brain works, I have always tried to do Camp NaNoWriMo exactly like NaNoWriMo, to sort of keep in marathon trim for NaNoWriMo itself. So I have stuck to 50,000 words and more. I have usually turned that 1,667 words a day into 1,700 words, for instance, just to round up, just because it's easier to do for me. And I wondered what I was going to do for Camp NaNoWriMo, and I kept being bothered by NaNoWriMo failure that I had, where I wrote a piece of tentacle fiction. I had enjoyed probably every piece of tentacle fiction that's ever been published, and I decided I want to do this for myself, knowing, maybe enticed by the fact that one of the key aspects of tentacle fiction is at least one scene where the tentacled main character and the non-tentacled main character get it on. Not a scene where they talk about it, or a scene where they reflect on how they've just done it, but a scene that describes that. A sex scene, in other words. At least one. True that in tentacle fiction, it's a sex scene that gets, so to speak, out of hand rather quickly, but nevertheless, it's still a sex scene. And I have resisted that for the whole of the time that I've been writing for fun. Because in the same way that I've resisted it for the whole of the time that I've been reading for fun or for profit, which is that I never understood what sex scenes are doing in the book. They're always bad writing, and they necessarily aren't character building because your character stops for the length of time that is involved in that scene. It has to be some sort of private Olympics in terms of how you write it, which always struck me as very solipsistic in a way that it's just not the way that I write at all. So it was a totally different wavelength for me and something I never actually felt like doing. And then I tried to do it and didn't. I intentionally wrote a story that was set in a subgenre that cannot do without that scene, at least one. And I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it or I wouldn't do it. One way or another, I got to it and said, no. No. I have the rest of the story to tell. I will tell the rest of the story, but I'm not going to write that. What would be the point? And that bothered me. That stuck in my craw. And so I thought, well, what if for Camp NaNoWriMo you set yourself a story, a task, a plot that is that? So it isn't just that the plot will at some point contain a scene like that. It's that is the plot. And I did. I planned something out. It's not going to stay that way. The end of the story it takes a turn and is not anymore that. But the main bulk of the story is called Gilroy Rent Boy, and it's about a very good-looking, very toned and athletic young man in Gilroy, California, who works part-time at Walmart, but he also has a thriving clientele of customers. uh, male customers, men who, and I knew when I started that would mean I would have to write those scenes. And I have written quite a few of those. It has been, in a way, a kind of breakthrough. Not in a particularly happy sense, because the minute that I forced myself to sit down, this is about a little more than a week ago, I forced myself to sit down and write the first of those scenes, which is the first scene in the book, even though it's not the first scene I wrote. It will be the first scene when I finish, writing Gilroy. It will be the first scene. When I sat down and made myself do that, I realized in quick order that the secret to writing those scenes is not hard, so to speak. The secret, it's not difficult at all. The shoe that needed to drop was not the technique, so to speak, of writing those chapters, but instead the audience. It isn't incredibly solipsistic. Instead, it's just the opposite. It's that you take yourself out of the writing process together. You are writing those chapters, those scenes, those kinds of scenes, entirely for your reader, with none of the personal engine revving that I love as the experience of writing fiction. I absolutely love that feeling. Absolutely love it. It's the thing I'm talking about when I urge all of you to try your hand at writing fiction. I am talking about that feeling, which is largely indescribable, ironically enough, but which you can't get anywhere else. And anyone can do it. You have a pen and a pad of paper. You can do it. It's incredible. You really should try it. It won't be immediate. You need to learn how to maneuver the tools first. But once, so to speak, I guess this is going to be a double entendre video. I guess that's inescapable. Well, that's kind of hard, but we'll just have to take it in hand and work it. When you do that, that is an incredible feeling. But that is not a time clock punch. That is not done for other people. That's done for you. And sex scenes can't be that. At least as far as I'm understanding them now that I've written a few, they are entirely outward. You're not enjoying, I'm not enjoying writing them at all. And originally I thought, well, if you're doing this for fun instead of for pay, then don't write anything that you're not enjoying. But there is a technique to them. There's a way to learn how to do them. There are, believe it or not, believe you me, now that I'm familiar with twincest and tentacle romance, I know this perfectly well. There is very much such a scene as a boring sex scene. That is very much true. And you don't want to do that. And that takes practice. It takes practice and experimentations. It takes hands-on experimentation. So I have learned a lot. And I'm going to continue. I'm going to write Gilroy Rentboy all the way to the end. I want to get to the ending. The ending's the part that came to me first. So that is my Camp NaNoWriMo update. Is that I had, I guess you could say, the breakthrough that I wanted. I ran across, in an earlier writing exercise, I ran across a thing that I would not do. I hit a wall. And one of the main things that I have been praising about writing, preaching about writing, in seminars long before there was a YouTube, was that those walls don't exist. That you are in a godlike position. It is, like I said, it's an unbelievable, almost indescribable experience. The feeling of doing it is almost indescribable. And a large part of that feeling comes from the fact that you are in complete control. Everything is possible. And here, when I was writing this story, I got to a scene that I knew was coming. I knew it was part of what I wanted to write. I didn't do it. Just backed away from it completely. So Gilroy Rentboy has taught me how to do that. But it hasn't been entirely a pleasant experience, and it's not a question of not being good at it. It's a question of the fact that I had a blind spot. I had a wall that I didn't expect would be there, and you can't just let it sit there. You can't just give up and let it sit there. Now I know that I can do this, and I will continue. This book has probably 10 more such scenes in it. I'm tending to alternate chapters. So every other chapter is Gilroy is my main character, Tim or Tam or Tech or whatever his name is, with a client of some kind or another. Which is, I chose this plot line this sort of book organization in order to make me write about it, but I did not go whole hog. I could have, and I didn't. Because I have alternating chapters, because there are parts to my character's life other than those chapters, because he is not completely consumed by that aspect of his world, and that aspect of his world and all other aspects of his world take a marked right turn at the end of the book. That's still me pulling away from the subject just a bit. I could have gone in whole hog. I don't know how many of you are familiar with an online personality named Reno Gold. He's a young man with a decent set of shoulders. He's not particularly good looking. He's not tall. He's rather noticeably stupid. He has an OnlyFans account. And if you're at all interested in where Gilroy Rentboy could have gone, if you look up Reno Gold, I'm sure he's one example among many, but if you look up his OnlyFans and you see how much he's charging, and then you do the math by multiplying that against how many people subscribe to his OnlyFans, you will see how he was able to buy a house in cash at the age of 23. I could have had my main character, Tam or Tech or Tim, I could have had him be entirely in that world. And I didn't do it. I didn't do it. I can't imagine, well, needless to say, I can't imagine what that would be like, but I also can't imagine writing about that. I think that Tim's world is fodder for dramatic fiction. I've read other pieces of fiction that are like that. Reno Gold's world is not. I don't believe there's anything there at all. I don't know that you could make a story out of it. I think it's empty of content. Which, it seems a little odd to pity someone who's making $500,000 a month, but I do. I wouldn't want to live his life. I wouldn't want to be trapped inside it. No way. Not a chance in the world. For all the houses that I could buy, who knows? I've lost track of how many condos he says he owns now. He's a real estate mogul. Quite in addition to the fact that he is prancing around in his birthday suit on Instagram. So I could have done that, but I think I've learned enough from Gilroy Rentboy. I think I have learned enough. I don't think I need to write an OnlyFans novel. I really don't think I do. I think I've learned enough. I'm learning as I go. I'm learning to, I think, get better at writing these kinds of scenes, get more inventive, more imaginative at them, keep myself interested enough to get to 1,700 words for that scene. I don't think I'll be returning to it. All of my original dispositions about sex scenes in fiction have not been challenged at all by first balking at writing one and now learning how to write them. My opinions about whether or not they belong in fiction have not changed. It was just a wall. It was a mountain that was there, and so I needed to make sure that I could do it. How on earth could I be teaching and recommending the process of writing fiction to people over decades and reach such a wall and not breach it? There's no way that I could do that. So I had to do that, and I am enjoying Gilroy. I am enjoying writing the story. But the second part of my Camp NaNoWriMo update is the next Camp NaNoWriMo, which is in July. And it touches on something else, another bugaboo, another thing that has felt more or less like a failure. And that is writing classic murder mysteries. Sorry for the whiplash. We're going from a rent boy to classic murder mysteries. But another sort of black box area for me was classic murder mysteries, which I've talked about on this channel many times, not only for Camp NaNoWriMo and NaNoWriMo, but also for March Mystery Madness, which is this intricate clockwork of a plot that you as the writer have to come up with in every last detail before you start doling out those details and also fake details in the course of hooking your reader, in the course of the mystery. You have to know everything about the timetable of the local train from Paddington. You have to know everything about the noise that a private elevator makes or how long it takes to get from one floor to the next. You have to know everything about street cleaning rules and regulations if you're going to have a street cleaner who observes something that he shouldn't see. You have to know all of that. You have to know where all of your characters are at every minute of every day. You have to have that all carefully whiteboard plotted out before you start to write the book at all. Otherwise, you get tripped up in your own details and you will have wasted months of writing time. That's what I told myself. And that's what the impression that every classic murder mystery that I read gave. All of them. And so the few times that I've tried to do that, I have considered largely failures. Because either they were so didactic, because I was so concerned with all of that prior plotting, that the book read that way. And I've read published books that read that way. I read a police procedural just a couple of weeks ago that was an instruction manual. It was, sure, there were tons of clues and tons of red herrings, but I was reading the author's outline with barely any attempt made at character building or suspense building or anything like that. I told myself, you definitely have to do that, and you want to avoid both over-egging the pudding and also being too loosey-goosey on the plot, because that will, avid readers of murder mysteries will notice that in a heartbeat and think you don't know what you're doing, because you don't know what you're doing, because that's part of writing a classic murder mystery. And I've tried it a couple of times for NaNoWriMo related events and also just on my own, and it just seemed completely beyond me to do. It seemed almost mathematical, like a proof in math. Just, it started to verge into territory that didn't feel like anything other than working out, if you were here, then where was so-and-so and when, and what was the angle of the sun coming through the window and whatnot. It started to feel not at all like what I go to writing fiction for. And I brought this up with an old friend of mine who used to write murder mysteries. And she is out of the game. She says, I am completely retired for now. She loves to do that. She does it all the time. With me, anyway. She does it all the time. I'm completely retired for now. And I brought this up to her. I went to her a year ago with, for advice about the specifics of plotting and whatnot, and she helped a little, but she seemed a little bored with it. I wondered why at the time, since it had to have been her bread and butter. She wrote a lot of murder mysteries. It had to have been her bread and butter for that. And I went to her again with the subject just recently, and she laid an atom bomb on me, and I am still reeling from it, and it is going to be my July Camp NaNoWriMo. She said, I have a confession to make to you. When you talk about this complex clockwork plotting and how it's only when that's up on the whiteboard that I can actually start to write the mystery, and you tell me about murder mystery author biographies that you read where they all say that, she said, I'm not saying they're all lying, but I have never written a murder mystery in the way that you're describing. Never. I've never done it. And I said, well, what on earth do you mean? Surely you work out the crimes ahead of time and the modus operandi and all that. And she said, no, I've never done anything like that. I said, well, then how on earth do you start the book? And she said, well, I usually start with a dramatic scene. That's nice and fun to write, isn't it? I was outraged, but also mock outraged. I was saying, what on earth are you saying? This is you're betraying your whole genre. Are you saying you make it up as you go along? And she said, well, more or less, I do. I think about it as it's going on. No one knows about the writing process but me, but I don't work out every last little train schedule ahead of time. That would be a joyless experience. Well, she was right about that. Whenever I did that, the writing was a joyless experience. I asked her, well, so I should give this another try. She said, absolutely, give it another try. And I said, and you're saying I shouldn't work out the plot ahead of time in exhaustive detail? And she said, for July, for Camp NaNoWriMo, why don't you try not working out the plot at all? And I said, well, what on earth, where would I even start? And she said, start with a murder scene, an outre murder scene, something gripping. And then either your private eye or your police or whoever's going to solve the crime, figure it out with them. When I heard that, as Gandalf would say, my quest was over. When I heard that, I realized immediately that I would try that approach for Camp NaNoWriMo in July. Plantsing a murder mystery, which I didn't think was possible. That, those of you who don't know NaNoWriMo terminology, seat of the pants means you're flying along without any plan at all. And plotting means you are plotting the thing in all the time that you have up to NaNoWriMo, and then during NaNoWriMo, you write out the plot. And then there's the middle ground of plantsing, which is not a real word, but should be, because I think it's what most writers do. especially most fiction writers, where you have a kind of sort of plot, and you're kind of sort of seat of the pants things. You're kind of sort of doing things as you go along. So if you have a kind of a sort of plot, you know that that if you're writing a rom-com, an asteroid is not going to strike the Earth. You know that if you're writing hard science fiction, a vampire is not going to show up. You have a kind of sort of idea of what you want, and you will feel your way along as part of the excitement of writing it. And I thought for years that the one kind of writing that you certainly couldn't plant would be a murder mystery. But my old friend was telling me essentially, try it. And I ruminated on that, and I was cuddling with the bean one night when suddenly my murder scene occurred to me in complete detail, just like I was looking at it. And I can't wait. I will wait, but I metaphorically, I am very, very eager to give this a try. I haven't come up with characters yet. I have a feeling, much as I hate it, that my characters, my sleuths, are going to have to be cops. We went through all that with March Mystery Madness, all this ambiguity of mine about the authority to solve a crime and the detection ability, and whether or not they cross or are completely separate or are the same thing. And I really don't see my way around it. And I don't see my way around an amateur. An amateur sleuth is going to have to deal with the law anyway. I might as well. I've already written one NaNoWriMo project about a cop. I didn't find it a very soiling experience. I think, depending on how I shape my characters, I can probably avoid the soiling nature of the subject. So I haven't figured out who they are. I haven't figured out anything at all. But I see the scene, the opening scene, which will probably be the first 4 chapters of the book, will all revolve around that. I haven't figured out who the characters are. I know nothing about the crime other than the end result. I know nothing about a classic murder mystery, which is what I want this to be. A classic murder mystery has to have at least one follow-up crime. I have no idea what that will be. And most especially, I don't know how I will write it. What will be the narrative tone, the narrative pacing, the actual writing. I will be cogitating on that while my Gilroy Rentboy is going about his business. But I wanted to give you an update on that as well, that I am on fire with a new approach to writing a murder mystery, an approach that never crossed my mind, which is not to exhaustively plot it, not to bring it closer to mathematics. So I'm going to give that a try and see how it works. But anyway, those are my 2 NaNoWriMo updates for you, both of which are exciting in their own way. and if you're doing Camp NaNoWriMo in April, I'd love to hear how it's going for you. I'd love to know what you're doing. But that, a lot of you, I don't get the impression are. I think probably I would have to move a little bit closer into the deep end of the AuthorTube pool to do that. And I don't know anybody on AuthorTube. I don't know who those people are. I would know what channels to look for. That's another question that I have for you. In addition to what you're doing for Camp NaNoWriMo, do you follow AuthorTube channels that you like? Who can you recommend? Because I'd like to do more writing videos. So I'm writing all the time. Anyway, those are 2 nano updates for you. So I'll wrap this up for now, and I'll be back. Thank you, BookTube.